Welcome to the Lit Up Lightworker Podcast, bringing you fun and soulful interviews with spiritual teachers with the aim of tuning you in and lighting you up. You can access all episodes of the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos and interviews on spirituality and wellness. My name is George Lizos. I'm a spiritual teacher, intuitive, the co-creator of Elemental Healing, and the author of Be the Guru. And I'm so excited to have here with me the radiant Leigh Mercree. Leigh is a best-selling author, holistic health expert, and medical intuitive. She counsels women and men in the underrated art of self-love to create happier lives. Leigh teaches internationally, sharing next-level healing, meet your guides, mindfulness meditation, and bestseller bootcamp classes. She's the author of 11 books on spirituality, including her latest work, A Little Bit of Goddess. Lee's motto is live joy, be kind, love unconditionally. Leigh, welcome to the Lit Up Lightworker Podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. Yay.
I am so excited to have you here. We both have our goddess crowns on for those who can't see us listening to the podcast. And we're so excited to dive into goddess energy. First of all, Leigh, I want to start from the beginning. What got you interested in studying goddesses, goddess spirituality, and the divine feminine? What has been your path to getting here and introducing this book into the world?
So great question. So really since the beginning of my medicine path, when I was a teenager, about 17, 18, the divine feminine and goddess energy has been present for me. So as I learned and then began to work as a medical intuitive and to teach and things like that, all the way straight through, it's always been about goddesses for me and other guides as well. But the divine feminine's been present. And for me, it's been a guide in my life and in my work. So for me personally, and for so many people, women and men, over 15 years now, I've been doing this work. So it's just been the goddesses and the divine feminine as a whole have just been super duper influential.
And it's something that's been happening on for the past 15 years and more for many people, like the divine feminine energy is coming in so much more strongly because there is this need for balance given what patriarchy has created into the world. So whenever I chat to someone teaching about the divine feminine, I want to remind people that it's not just a new age concept, it's really ancient. So could you give us like a crash course history lesson into what the honoring of the goddess through the years has been like?
Sure. The earliest recorded history of goddess worship is 20 to 30,000 BC.
Wow.
I mean, think about that. And throughout history, we see evidence of that. And so back when people thought that God was a woman, it was partially because women gave birth. So that was part of where the mystique came from and where native peoples, indigenous peoples would derive inspiration. And so throughout history, all around the world, many different rituals, ceremonies, practices have been enacted to pay homage to the goddess and to seek favor with the goddess, because that was part of how they would view it, like, for a good harvest or a plentiful year or mild winter, whatever they were wanting, as well as in their personal lives. And so goddess worship was certainly done in an organized institutional manner in temples and all kinds of things like that. But it's also something that's been done, we have evidence in the home and as a personal practice throughout history, and really as far back as we know in recorded history.
Even drawing from my own culture here in Cyprus. So Cyprus is famous for like the birthplace of Aphrodite in the Hellenistic years. But what I've discovered recently, even when you go back before the Greek gods were ever theorized by the ancient Greeks or Cypriots, Cyprus had the great Cypriot goddess. It was a female deity, the first artifact we found ever from the Paleolithic times. I think Paleolithic or Neolithic, I'm not exactly sure, but the oldest statue we found was of a very voluptuous kind of woman, breasts out, legs open, very fertile kind of energy, which gives us the idea and makes us realize how this idea of fertility and motherhood and the divine feminine was so prominent in matriarchal cultures, which is exactly what you're referring to right now. And it was only afterwards, after the ancient Cypriots started mingling with the ancient Greeks, that it changed, it transformed into what we today know as Aphrodite, later on Venus, and later on Mother Mary here in Cyprus, because there was this clear transition from the great goddess of Cyprus to Aphrodite to Venus, and then now Mother Mary.
Yeah.
So what changed though? What changed? How did we go? How do we forget the goddess and let a masculine god prevail?
Right. So we know back in Roman times that there were some efforts to quell the goddess. So you hear, there's some different myths and legends around that. So that was when the Romans were moving into worshiping multiple masculine deities, and not that they didn't always have that, but they were placing more emphasis on those warring qualities, and most likely because there was a big aim and a big drive, which there is today as well, to acquire more land, to control more resources, and so a sense of competition as opposed to community, which is kind of a little bit more traditionally masculine, a little bit more traditionally feminine, although not necessarily, but so that's where we started to see that. And then as time moved forward and Christianity began to be known, then of course we had the Crusades, which was all about wiping out the goddess. And so the way we learned about it in American school when I was a kid was more that it was to spread this idea of one Christian God, and to suppress what were deemed like more wild people. But in fact, these were the native peoples worshiping nature, worshiping multiple deities, and being in tune with nature and harmony with nature. And so then the Crusades came in, and the whole aim was to wipe that out. And so that's where I think a big shift began. And then we had a lot of factions who wanted to promote eventually the Catholic, but what evolved into the Catholic and the Christian church, designed to indenture people to need an intermediary between themselves and this one God and this Jesus figure, with I'm sure with lots of great intentions, but also with intentions to once again control money, resources, land, to have power. So this is when I think the shift happened. Was this probably a little bit of a back and forth struggle in tribal cultures prior to that did worship the goddess? I'm sure there was both. And there were, masculine and feminine deities through all of these time periods. Roman, back through Greek, back through Babylonian, Mesopotamian, through ancient history, and even back before that. There, Gnosticism, there are masculine and feminine deities. So this may be an old struggle where now the scale had tipped a little toward the masculine right now.
And now we are at a point where I feel, I don't know what your experience with people has been. I feel that people in the spiritual community, some people tend to vilify the masculine because of what happened, because of how it's been abused. We're vilifying the divine masculine and solely focusing on the divine feminine. So whenever I do an interview like on the divine feminine, I want to bring up the question: how do we balance? How do we allow the divine feminine to rise without ignoring the divine masculine, in other words?
I love that question because it's so important. And I believe within all of us, we have a masculine and a feminine side. And so the idea and the ideal situation is for this to be in balance. And even back through goddess mythology, there's a lot of it the mythology of ancient history with goddesses Inanna and even Isis in Egyptian mythology with the goddess Ishtar. These myths are the same about these feminine deities journeying to the underworld to bring back the pieces of their divine masculine consort. Ultimately, they put the pieces of the masculine consort back together. For example, Inanna and Dumuzi, Ishtar and Tammuz, Isis and Osiris. And then when the masculine is resurrected, then they are in harmony in what's called the sacred marriage. And it's a symbol, I believe, of alchemy and an internal alchemy. So we need both. I love the divine masculine. You know, it's an important part. And I think when we can tap into both sides of that, we can have more inner union and we can be more effective in the world as well.
Yes, it sounds like there is masculine within the feminine and there is feminine within the masculine, in other words. It sort of reminds me, here in Cyprus, we have a temple, one of the ancient temples of Aphrodite, and they also honored Aphroditus, which was the male version of Aphrodite, which eventually became Hermaphroditus and then Hermaphrodite.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That element of like the two energies blending together, how beautiful when we find this balance. So
hopefully we're getting there.
Hopefully we're getting there.
Kind of on a global level, kind of rocking back and forth.
Which brings me to my next question. What are some practical processes we can use to embrace the divine feminine without vilifying the divine masculine at the same time, therefore doing this balanced work?
Yeah, I love that. So in my book, A Little Bit of Goddess, we have tons of really great guided meditations to work with specific goddesses on specific topics. So that kind of covers that, but also to bring in the divine masculine. It's really nice, I think, to meditate with, let's say, you know, goddesses that we know their consorts. So for example, the goddess Ishtar, who's a goddess of beauty, who's a goddess of love, who's a kind of a badass goddess too. And then her consort is Dumuzi. So to sit, to meditate, to do whatever spiritual practice we have, I do a lot of automatic writing, like spirit writing. You know, I teach shamanism. So if you knew how to journey shamanically, you could journey with these guides. To journey with both, to journey with Ishtar and with Tammuz and see how does that meet, how do those journeys or how do those writings or how do those meditations mesh, and then even asking those beings if they are these archetypal beings who've reached this state of alchemical union, asking them to help you find that within. And I also think when we have found that within ourselves, it opens us up to partner with somebody who's also found that within themselves. And then we can live it in the internal and the external.
So it's a combination of having this clear intention of bringing both into our lives and then using something like a meditation to just invite those guides to show us how to balance the two energies.
Yeah. And
yes.
Dance, you could do a dance to honor each, you could do art to connect with each, you could make music, whatever is your spiritual practice.
And can we talk about, like, if we had, because there are so many goddesses and gods from so many different pagan religions around the world. In the past, I used to like combine different gods, like let's work with Ishtar and Aphrodite, blah, 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 which is perfectly possible. Now I focus primarily on the Greek gods because of my culture, because I'm like a priest to the to Greek paganism. But if we could talk about three goddesses that we can work with to help us find this union between masculine and feminine, who would these be? Or combination of like god and goddess?
I love this question. And I'd love to share with the viewers at home how cool it's been to get to start being friends with George, because I'm half Greek and there you are in Cyprus. Like, it's just been really neat. And I love that, like, I could pull up my flower crown for our talk too.
It was definitely a spiritual synchronicity. I knew we were meant to meet, to have this conversation and to share stuff.
Me too. Me too, and much more, you know. So that's a really great question. 3 goddesses that can help us with this inner union. I love that, and I think a great way for us to think about this will be kind of to go through 3 that come to my mind. One from the maiden category, one from the mother lover category, and one from the wise women category.
I love
So
that.
my go-to maiden goddess, which doesn't necessarily mean young, it means independent. Is what it really means, is Artemis. And
Yes, I knew you would say that.
you know, she's like my main girl for a long time. So working with Artemis, I think, is really wonderful. And the essence of this maiden, or this, you know, independent woman, we'll call it, archetype, is one that isn't about external union. It's not about the goddess partnering in this case. So it's a really great opportunity to work with Artemis, who seems to me to be very integrated. You know, a consummate huntress, a supreme archer. These are some of her, you know, very athletic, like very independent. These are some of these qualities. And yet she is a goddess, and she is very much in the feminine. So how to work with her, to meditate with her, to journey with her, to write with her, to do a dance with her, to create art, you know, embodying her, whatever way you do your practice, I think she's great. And then for the mother lover category, there's so many goddesses that we could work with. And as far as bringing us into that, that union within ourselves, I think I would recommend the goddess Inanna, who's another favorite of mine. And so she's a goddess from the time of ancient history, ancient civilizations. Her consort is Dumuzi, and I love Inanna because to me she feels like a little bit more of the softer side of Ishtar. And so historically she preceded Ishtar as well, and after Ishtar, Isis was next historically in chronological time. So I think Inanna is really wonderful to work with, to tap into love, to beauty, to that goddess within, and yet to also tap into the way she does partner with Dumuzi, who is embodying the divine masculine. So to connect with both of them and how that outpictures. And then to talk to a wise woman goddess, gosh, there's so many. And I have a special connection, I mean, gosh, with many goddesses, but the one I'm coming to mind for me is the goddess Kali, the Hindu goddess. And so Kali, we know, is like a really great transformational goddess. So she will clear the deck so we can have new growth. But she's also very nurturing and loving. And so she can be actually a mother or lover goddess, like that one. And she can be a wise woman, which we also hear is crone goddess. I love Kali for that. And I think Kali is really helpful because we can call her in and ask her to clear away anything that's blocking these 2 parts of ourselves from alchemizing. And then all of these goddesses, we can ask them for wisdom. And one of the things I always tell people is our guides, and goddesses are guides for us, for the whole human race, and also regionally at times. Our guides cannot usurp our free will. We have to ask for them to help. They can help to some degree, but to really let them get in here, we have to ask. So if we were to do a practice with all 3 of these goddesses and say, please help me with this idea of integrating my masculine and feminine, and also to help me manifest my heart's desires and experience what's for my highest good, I give you permission. And then you can also say, this or something better. So then we've like covered all the bases.
Yes, I love how multidimensional the goddesses are. Like, it's not just about love or just this immature kind of thing. It's a combination. Like, you can work with them at every phase of your life, and you can get wisdom from so many different levels. And something that's fun fact for people listening as well, that I think they'll find interesting, like some unknown lost part of history. In Greece, there is this mountain called Mount Athos. It's like a part of Greece that right now it's a male-only trenched land full of male-only monasteries. I had visited that back when I was Christian. And in the ancient years, that used to be a women-only mountain full of temples of Artemis. It was Artemis's land. It was all temples of Artemis. And then see how it shifted as patriarchy took over to a male-only mountain full of male-only monasteries. Like women are not allowed to step foot on that island for like thousands of years now.
It's the domain of Artemis.
I know, right? How cool. Anyway, okay, Amy Leigh, thank you so much for sharing these fabulous tools with us. We've learned so much about goddess energy, about awakening both the divine feminine and the divine masculine within us. And listeners also have practical tools they can use and goddesses they can call upon to turn their goddess on and really establish that inner union between masculine and feminine. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yay, it's been so nice talking with you, George. I'm so glad I got to be on your show.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.